The clink of silverware was the only sound in the room when Colton reached across the table and shoved my plate toward the edge. "You eat, but don't help," he said flatly, like a man reading from a script he'd long rehearsed. Mara didn't even look up from her phone. She just snorted a laugh and muttered, "Finally," as if that line had been waiting in the wings for weeks. The air in the dining room thickened. My grandson paused mid-bite. My granddaughter stared at her lap. No one looked at me. I kept my hands steady as I stood. My knees cracked softly, age reminding me I'd been carrying more than groceries and laundry. I picked up the plate, walked it to the sink, and rinsed it under cold water. The food went down the drain. My appetite had left before I even stood. I didn't say a word as I climbed the stairs. I closed my bedroom door gently, but not so quietly that they wouldn't hear it. Down the hall, Mara's voice floated out, too loud to be private. "I told you she'd eventually get the hint." That sentence landed harder than the plate. I sat on the edge of my bed and let the silence settle. The room smelled faintly of cedar and old perfume remnants of another version of me. At midnight, I pulled out the tin box from the back of my closet. My hands didn't tremble as I turned the key. Inside, beneath layers of careful wrapping, lay the deed to the house. My name, my husband's signature. The date stamped by the county clerk the year Colton graduated high school. We'd rebuilt this place from ashes. Now they sat in it like owners. They never asked. They never checked. I folded the papers back into place, stood, and opened the closet. The old suitcase was there, the one I hadn't touched in years. By dawn, it would be packed. I rose before the sun and made sure my door closed quietly behind me. The hallway creaked less if you stepped just right. After all these years, I still remembered where not to step. In the kitchen, the coffee pot sputtered its slow morning song. I poured a cup and sat in the armchair facing the window, the one with stuffing coming out of the armrest. It used to be my husband's favorite spot before his legs gave out. We'd rebuilt this room together after the winter storms of '97 ripped half the roof clean off. He patched the ceiling while I laid out borrowed tarps. We couldn't afford contractors then, just each other. And stubbornness. Now, it smelled of lemon cleaner and silence. I looked around at what had once been ours. The baseboards we painted. The shelves we hung by hand. The fireplace we tiled with secondhand stone. All still here. But now, so was Mara's laundry piled on the couch. The kids' snack wrappers under the cushions. Dirty dishes left in the sink like I was the help. Colton had started announcing utility costs out loud. Hot water's up this month again, always when I walked into the room. The children had begun parroting things they barely understood. "Last week," my grandson whispered, "Mom says Grandma doesn't pay for anything." It hurt. Not in the sharp way, but the slow, dull way you don't notice until you're already limping. That afternoon, while folding laundry, I found a stack of printed Airbnb listings on the counter. My room, my bed, my name highlighted in yellow. 7 nights. No mention to me. I heard Mara in the next room say, "We need the space in September. My parents aren't staying in a hotel." I folded a pair of jeans with calm, deliberate hands. No tremble, no rush. I stacked each shirt with precision. Let them keep their assumptions. I knew what I owned. Later that night, I wrote down the number of a real estate lawyer from the back of a church bulletin I'd tucked in my purse months ago. Colton called it a family meeting, like we were all equals sitting down to share something sacred. But when I walked into the dining room, the tone was already set. He stood at the head of the table. Mara hovered just behind him, arms crossed, as if she'd rehearsed this with him in front of the mirror. I took my usual seat at the end, by the window, the spot where I used to watch for Colton's school bus when he was small, where I'd peeled apples for his lunchbox pies. The varnish on the table was still fresh from the coat I'd given it last spring. Colton slid a stapled paper across the wood toward me. "We've put together something. Fair," he said. I looked down. It was a spreadsheet. Utilities, food, maintenance costs broken into monthly expectations. At the bottom, a total that swallowed nearly my full pension check. Mara leaned forward. "We just thought, since you're living here full-time now," it made sense. "It's only fair." Fair. I looked at their faces. There wasn't cruelty there. No raised voices. Just assumption. Quiet entitlement. They'd already decided what I owed, and this was just the formality. I signed. Not because I agreed, but because it didn't matter. That paper held no weight next to the one locked upstairs in my closet. They didn't know I paid the property tax every December. They didn't know the new roof 2 winters ago had come out of a savings account in my name. I'd let them believe the city paid for the sidewalk repair. I never corrected them. I watched my signature dry, black ink fading to matte. I handed the paper back, folded neatly, and excused myself. Upstairs, I unlocked the tin box. I laid the new paper beside the deed. One a gesture of performance, the other power. I didn't plan to argue. I planned to leave them exactly what they'd asked for, just not in the way they expected. The hose made its usual soft hiss as I moved between the flower beds. I was trimming back the lilies when I heard the sliding door click open behind me. She said she'd ask her friend about starting the transfer early. Mara said. Her voice was low but clear. Too careless to think I might be nearby. Colton replied, "It'll be smoother once she's finally ready to move on. We just have to be patient." I didn't move. I let the water pool around the roots of the hydrangeas until it soaked through the soil. My hands stayed still, but something inside me didn't. They were talking about the house, about me, like I was an inconvenience they were working around. Later that evening, I went down for a glass of water. The light was off, but I could hear Mara's voice again, on speakerphone this time. "Once the paperwork's in our name, we'll gut the place. Her room goes first. I want the walls gone." Colton laughed in the background. "That old carpet has to be burned." I backed up slowly. They didn't hear me. The laughter kept going, like I was already gone and they were planning the funeral. Back in my room, I sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, the glass of water still in my hand, untouched. They weren't just waiting for me to leave. They were preparing for it. They were building a world where I no longer existed inside these walls. Not family, not guest, just something in the way. I set the glass down, opened my laptop, and typed in property attorney near me. My fingers felt calm, steady, like I was threading a needle after years of forgetting how. I copied down 5 names, then I underlined one. Not because I was ready to fight, but because I was ready to leave without looking back. The office was plain. No marble floors or leather chairs, just soft lighting. A clean desk, and a woman who didn't blink when I handed over the folder. Ms. Harrow took her time. She read every page of the deed, flipped through the property tax statements, paused on a receipt from the roof repairs 3 years ago. Then she looked up. "You own the property outright," she said. "Your name is the only one that appears on the deed. No liens, no joint claimants. You can sell it privately, quietly. No signatures needed from them." I didn't smile. I just exhaled, a slow breath. Steady and full, not relief. Exactly. But confirmation of what I already knew, or had nearly forgotten. "Ms. Harrow slid a notepad across the desk. "We'll list discreetly. Cash buyers only. Weekday showings. No sign on the lawn. They won't know until you want them to." She gave me the timeline. Clear, measured. I nodded, folded the papers back into my bag, and thanked her. The walk home felt different. I noticed the sway of the old oak trees along the sidewalk, the way the gravel shifted beneath my shoes. The house came into view not as a weight I was dragging behind me, but as something I owned, fully, without apology. All this time, I'd lived like I was at the mercy of the people who occupied it, as if I were the guest, the shadow, but I was never powerless. I'd just gotten used to handing over room to people who mistook kindness for weakness. That night, I made dinner. I didn't slam drawers. I didn't burn anything. I stirred the beans. I sliced tomatoes. I placed plates on the table and sat in my usual spot. Mara walked in, glanced at the food, and turned away. Colton didn't say a word as he ate. No one asked me where I'd been. I watched them, quiet and steady. How easy it was for them to ignore the one who paid the tax bill, replaced the pipes, reset the breakers, and how easy it would be to let them keep ignoring me until they couldn't. Janice Reed pulled into the driveway just after sunrise. Her car, a modest sedan that wouldn't draw attention. She stepped out wearing jeans, a windbreaker, and a neutral expression. We didn't greet each other with hugs or pleasantries, just a nod and a shared understanding. We walked through the house together, room by room. She took quiet photos, careful not to frame family portraits or anything that would make strangers ask questions. Her lens captured the crown molding I painted by hand, the tile I laid with my husband during one long summer after his diagnosis. But there was no pause for sentiment. We settled on weekday showings between 10 and 2. Colton would be at work. Mara, too. The kids wouldn't be home from school until 3. I agreed to step out during showings, waiting in the garden cottage behind the garage, the small space where I once kept seedlings and forgotten tools. The first buyers came on a Wednesday. I sat with a thermos of tea and a paperback I didn't really read. Janice texted the all clear 40 minutes later. I slipped back inside like a ghost. Each showing pulled something loose in me. Not grief, freedom. Like unthreading a seam that had held too tight around the ribs. By the second week, Janice called. A couple from San Francisco, tech people, remote work, all cash, full asking price. They wanted a fast close. I said yes without flinching. That night, I started packing, quietly, one box at a time. Things that wouldn't be missed winter linens, framed recipes, books I'd read twice. I stacked them in the garden shed, tucked behind the bins of holiday decorations Mara hadn't touched in 2 years. At dinner, Colton mentioned something about refinancing. Mara said she wanted to redo the kitchen before the holidays. I chewed slowly and nodded once. None of them noticed the cardboard box tucked behind the kitchen door, labeled with nothing but a small black dot in the corner. By the time they did, there would be too many to count. I woke before the first bird called. The house was silent, still curled in its sleep. I dressed, tied my shoes, and moved slowly, like a woman not sneaking away but choosing to walk forward. The suitcases were already packed. I'd carried them down one step at a time the night before, leaving them by the front door like guests waiting for a cab. I lifted them gently and took them to my car, parked 2 blocks away beneath an elm that dropped leaves like whispers. On the kitchen island, I left the key beside it. 3 envelopes, one for Colton, one for Mara, and one for the children. Inside Colton's, a copy of the deed, the final sale notice, and a short letter in my handwriting. I didn't explain everything, just enough. What I paid for, what I repaired, what I tolerated, what I owned. At 9:45 sharp, the moving truck came. Big, white, unmissable. Behind it, the buyers stepped out smiling, expectant, holding coffee cups and a folder of documents that made their ownership official. I watched from the corner of Maple and 5th, my car tucked neatly between 2 others. Janice had me on speakerphone. "They're at the window," she said. Through the phone, I heard Colton's voice shaken, rising. A door opened. Footsteps. "What's going on?" he demanded. The movers replied evenly. "We're unloading for the new owners." Mara rushed out next, barefoot, still in her robe. "There's a mistake," she snapped. "This house isn't for sale." But then came the sound I'd been waiting for, the tearing of paper. The silence that follows understanding. They opened the envelope. Janice didn't speak. Neither did I. We just listened to the sound of the lie unraveling. Colton shouted something muffled. Mara stepped back, like the air had changed temperature. The buyers stood calmly beside the truck, looking at the lawn, the porch, the new beginning. I didn't step out of the car. I didn't wave. I watched as the house stopped being a question and became an answer. By morning, the neighborhood was already buzzing. I heard from Janice that 2 people had come by to ask if it was true, if I'd really sold the house without telling them. Others didn't ask. They remembered. They remembered the holiday when Colton scolded me for interrupting while he was telling a story. They remembered Mara pretending not to see me carrying groceries in alone. They remembered who watered the lawn, who scrubbed the porch, who always left gatherings early to check on dinner. Sympathy moves quietly in places like this. Nobody says it outright, but the wind changes. I've seen it before. Colton tried to reshape the story, claimed I blindsided them, that I'd been acting off for months. But people remember more than he thinks. The truth doesn't always need to shout to be heard. Meanwhile, I was on the other side of town, standing in the middle of a furnished apartment that didn't smell like anyone else's cooking. Month-to-month lease, utilities included. Clean. Quiet. At first, the silence was strange. Not unwelcome, just unfamiliar. No footsteps overhead. No cupboard slamming. No whispered complaints through a cracked door. I bought a small armchair and a sturdy lamp. I set up a reading corner near the window. I filled the kitchen with things I liked. Coffee I enjoyed. Bread I didn't have to hide. Fruit I didn't need to label. Each morning, I walked to the market with a small canvas bag. I picked out what I needed. No more, no less. I came home, cooked when I wanted, napped when I felt tired. I realized I hadn't truly rested in years. Not really. I'd slept, but always with one ear open, one eye watching the hallway, one shoulder carrying the weight of everyone else's comfort. Now, when I lay down, the stillness didn't ask anything of me. It simply let me be. A week had passed in peace when the email arrived. It was from my grandson's second-grade teacher. She'd attached a scanned drawing and a short note. "I thought you'd want to see this." She wrote, "He spoke about you with great care today." The picture showed a woman with gray hair, standing tall beside a red house. In her hand was a small brown toolbox. Above her head, in blocky crayon letters, it read, "My grandma fixes everything." I sat for a long time with that paper in my lap, not crying, just letting the weight of it settle into my chest. A kind of quiet repair I hadn't known I still needed. Later that afternoon, Mara's name lit up on my phone. The message was short. "The kids miss you. Would you be willing to see them?" I told her I'd be at the park near the waterfront at 3. I didn't ask questions. I just showed up. The sun was out. The breeze pulled gently through the trees. I sat on a bench facing the swings, not knowing if they'd actually come. Then I heard the voices, high, bright, familiar. They ran to me without hesitation, little arms around my waist, faces buried against my coat. I knelt down and held them both, breathing in the scent of grass and bubblegum shampoo. Colton stood by the car. He didn't move closer, but he didn't leave either. He looked thinner, tired. His face carried the look of a man realizing too late what had been holding his world steady. Mara approached quietly. "I'm sorry," she said. Not meeting my eyes, I nodded. That was all. Colton didn't speak. But when the children turned to look for his signal, He gave the smallest nod. He didn't pull them back. We walked toward the swings together, my hands holding theirs. I didn't have a house anymore, but I had this moment, feet in the grass, small fingers in mine, the sun on our shoulders. And for the first time, I understood the difference between being someone's shelter and being someone's home. The townhouse isn't large, but it's mine. Nestled a few blocks from the harbor, it catches morning light through tall windows and carries the soft hush of waves in the distance. I bought it with a portion of the sale, more than enough to live without fear, but modest enough to keep my peace. The second bedroom is no longer a guest room. I turned it into a workspace, half sewing, half woodworking, old skills, new tools, the hum of a small lathe, the scent of fabric and sawdust, the quiet rhythm of making things with my hands. I started small bookends, footstools, embroidered throw pillows. I listed them online under the name Harborline Woodworks. Orders trickled in, then more. Each piece I made was a reminder I still create, I still mend, I still shape the world around me. I set up 2 education funds, one for each grandchild, locked tight, legally sealed, outside the reach of their parents' decisions. I didn't mention them. I didn't need applause. I just needed to know their future had a door I could help keep open. Evenings were quiet, and I welcomed it. I cooked what I wanted, listened to music, sometimes danced with no audience but the moonlight on the floorboards. One evening, there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find Colton standing there, hands in his jacket pockets, eyes unsure. I didn't understand, he said. I nodded. I let him speak. I didn't reach to comfort him, but I didn't shut the door either. Some wounds don't ask for bandages. They ask for space to scar. When he left, I didn't cry. I sat by the window with a mug of tea. The harbor stretching out in the fading light. The tide moved in and out like breath. I watched the sky dim. The boats sway gently in their slips. I was no longer a guest in my own life. I was rooted, and in that stillness, I felt the quiet thrill of something new, not returning, but waiting, just ahead.